can sort of dissect it. How's it going, everyone? Welcome to this late night stream here for me. Those of you who are following the channel, you'll know I'm sort of gallivanting around parts of Southern Africa, and this time we actually have a stable internet connection, and I'm being rejoined by Alia Brahimi, who was a fantastic guest a couple of days back, and well, not just fantastic, but remarkable in that she single-handedly kept the live stream going by talking to a frozen picture of me or a broken picture and pretending like everything was fine. So you carried that, Ali, and I hope you got some recognition or some people followed your work because, yeah. But I've titled this. I had titled this live stream sort of Iran was escalating over the Strait of Hormuz, in that they were making more and more, continued remarks about what they're willing to do. But in the time that we planned this stream with you, Alia, the US and Iran, and critically third parties like the Saudis and I think a couple of other mediators like Pakistan have basically all said that there's a lot of progress and quote, getting a lot closer. That's the latest sort of comments coming out of as I say, various capitals. And I think that this is the critical element, and I'll hand it to you for your thoughts. But simply, in this past month of the multitude of claims from Trump that a deal is being done or about to see a deal, etc., it's always just been Trump. And now we've got not only the Iranians agreeing to that, but also third parties recognizing that genuine progress is being made. So it looks like we are actually getting somewhere. Do you get that feeling, or is it too early to tell?
No, I mean, this is the first time we've had this critical mass suggesting that something will be announced in the coming hours. But I think we have to temper our expectations in that it would be a memorandum of understanding. So essentially a starting off point. And if reporting's to believe that this would unfold in 3 stages, right? So it would be a formal end to the war first, and then it would be resolving the crisis in the Strait, the bit no one really wants to say out loud in Washington. And then the third bit would be opening a 30-day window for negotiations on a broader agreement, which can then be extended. And I think that's quite significant, actually, because the Trump administration can continue to kick points that don't make it look particularly good. It could continue to kick that can down the road, potentially past the midterms, into the long grass, especially in relation to the nuclear stuff. So, Trump has said again today, as he said all along, if we don't reach a deal, I'm going to blow them to 1,000 hells, But I think that that's unlikely because next week is Eid, actually, a religious holiday. And I don't think that anyone would accept him resuming the bombing on the week of Eid. But I hope you can hear me okay and that my audio is all right.
Yeah, no, everything's good.
Okay, good. So I'll just say that it looks like, from the bits that have come out, that Iran may finally have offered to reopen the Strait in exchange for these controversial war reparations from the US, which is basically another way of monetizing the Strait, right? Whichever way you cut it, they're getting a payout for the Strait. So it looks like that might, that's being floated. And then the other thing we hear is sanctions relief is what it's asking for, and for its assets to be unfrozen. So the point is that a lot of it is about cash for Iran and therefore regime security. So that is probably second most in their mind because inflation is running at 100% in Iran. 1 million Iranis have lost their jobs in this war. So, they're understanding that they need to be in a position to deal with the day after this ends.
So, yeah, I'm just seeing here, Trump has actually just posted on Truth Social that the quote, let me just read this out here. US President Trump has written on Truth Social that, quote, an agreement has been largely negotiated. He said he just finished, quote, a very good call with leaders in Saudi Arabia, UAE, Qatar. Oh my God, it's literally the whole Middle East. Saudi Arabia, the UAE, Qatar, Pakistan, Turkey, Egypt, Jordan, and Bahrain. Goodness. The possible deal is, quote, subject to finalization between the United States of America, the Islamic Republic of Iran. Interesting, he still calls it that. And the various other countries as listed, he added. So that's literally just come out in like the past 2 minutes. So it really does seem like we're at an end of this now. I mean, as you say, that I think it's great that you started off your point by clarifying that it is an MOU. So people who aren't overly perhaps informed about that, an MOU is effectively just there's no depth to it. It's just a written formal arrangement. It's like, I can give another example. When Azerbaijan and Armenia signed the ceasefire, that was more of an MOU. Trump claimed that he'd help resolve that historical division and violence. No, it was an MOU. The underlying crux of this situation still hasn't fully been resolved. Or what happened between Pakistan and India in May, a year ago? That was, I think, still largely an MOU initially. So, as you say, at least to me, this is still going to be a very surface level framework, of which the actual crux of this, Hormuz and enrichment, neither side can agree to that. So they're both just like, okay, whatever, let's just leave it and just stop fighting, because, well, my political capital is shot in the case of Trump, and the economy is shot in the case of Iran. And to your point about sanctions relief, I think that's a great, if the Iranians can wrangle that, that's a great win for them, because that will help stabilize the regime, won't it?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that, the message you just read out is testament to the fact that Trump is quite adamant or quite committed to putting lipstick on the pig, right? There was a testy conversation earlier this week between Trump and Netanyahu, who wanted strikes to resume. He really, really did. And Trump was clear that a deal is preferable. So for all of the grandstanding, we know, that he's reaching for the lipstick. And so the question is looking like, how bad a deal is it going to be, for the US? I think that's the bated breath. That's the reason people are holding their breath, because do you remember Mertz's comment about Trump being humiliated by the Iranis? And I think he spoke for a lot of onlookers, really. So the question is, which is the worst look? The deal or the own goal of the strait continuing to be closed? But either way, we don't have the details yet, but my sense is that all of this is going to look somewhat a long way from the unconditional surrender that was being demanded by Trump at the beginning of the war. And that in itself is a huge success for the Iranis.
Yeah, so I've got the full statement here. I'm not going to read out the whole thing, but I'll just share it on screen to people to let me bring this up here so that people can sort of also co-read it. But yeah, basically, so he's in the White Oval Office. He mentions all the leaders of all the places. It's quite a pretentious one. But I think the core bit is down here. An agreement has been largely negotiated, subject to, as we said. I had a call with Netanyahu, which likewise went very well. Final aspects and details of this deal are currently being discussed and will be announced shortly. In addition to many other elements of the agreement, the Strait of Hormuz will be opened.
Yeah.
I'm not sure that's been okay, that's a critical line, because I don't think that's been clarified on the Iranian side. So yeah, Trump making it clear. Well, here it is again. I think it remains to be seen whether or not this is genuinely true, or is Trump embellishing it as he often does. I don't know if it's changed.
Yeah, or are the Iranis kind of, minded to finally walk away from that position because he's giving them a boatload of cash? Is that one of the headline principles? Because, the point of charging tolls, as I suggested, it's another way of monetizing the strait. So instead of charging tolls for each, barrel of oil that's coming through, they can plug that gap by an alternative mechanism where they're getting a whole bunch of their assets unfrozen, or a whole bunch of sanctions relief, which has a similar effect. So I think for them to walk down from that position and the strait being opened would suggest a significant element of compromise. But just while you're typing, you said before, Peter, sorry, go on.
No, not at all. I'm just trying to write. I'm just writing a couple of things about this because I think it's noteworthy. But no, I think what's worth unpacking a little bit more is just how much of a concession do you think that this is from the US? Like, this is quite clearly the US has made quite a lot of, or the Americans seem to have made more concessions on the face of it, or what seems like on the surface, than the Iranians have in the terms of the money that they're going to be giving or the windfall that it's given to the Iranians, right? Or am I missing something?
No, you're not. I mean, we don't know the details yet, but I think you're right that just coming to the table like this, the Iranis said, it was a month ago now, yeah, negotiations have started and it's on our terms. And they weren't wrong. So the talks themselves were on the Iranians' terms, which was non-ideal for the Trump administration. But, I think that what we might see actually is concessions on the nuclear enrichment from Iran, because the operatic power of the drones, right, and the strategic mastery, obviously, of the closure of the strait, because of those things, maybe they'll be willing, maybe we're willing to pause enrichment for, say, 5 years or something. They have achieved deterrence through other means. So I think that's something else to look for. And maybe they even try to play the Trump administration in a way. This is just conjecture, but if they give up the 440 kilograms of uranium, that gives Trump an element of a win. And, it was enough for like 11 nuclear weapons in theory. So they could say that they forestalled that. But maybe they keep something behind, or they buy the Niger that's sitting at the airport, the uranium that's sitting in the airport in Niger, or they decide, we just don't need it because we have sufficiently installed a deterrent mechanism. But then on the other hand, I think we have to remember that something like 13,000 target sets were hit by Operation Epic Fury. I think they had 3,000 more to do, and the regime still did not collapse. So I think regime security has itself been tested, and unfortunately, it's been quite strong. Some of these issues will come out in the wash the day after the war, as I intimated before. But let's not underestimate what it means for the regime in Iran that it will have come out of a war, if this is true, with the superpower and the regional hegemon, with a negotiated solution, which might even be favorable to it, and all of its latent power intact. I mean, that's extraordinary.
Yeah, it's the thing that people who are deliberately lazy or want to simplify a complicated issue will sort of say, oh, so you're saying Iran has won. No, it's not about sort of win or lose as it is who's come out relatively less scathed. And to your point, right, the goal, who's reached their objectives. And in this regard, the IRGC, the Islamic Republic, have been far more successful in what was their objective: survival and sustainment of the regime, of the government. So they, as you say, they've outlasted, they've endured the wrath of the US military and Israel, the regional hegemon or aspiring regional hegemon, and still live to fight another day. And if anything, come out with potential to command more control or influence over what was a free body of water for navigation. And now it's going to be somewhat told, or perhaps, or as you said, could you actually, I would be interested, like, what do you think about this reparations thing? Because I remember that being one of the first things that was floated as a sort of alternative form of payment, quote unquote, or to pay off. So could you unpack that a little bit more?
Well, I don't know too much about it. I mean, they're just basically saying that you've damaged so much of our infrastructure that we're entitled to this morally and, under international law and that sort of thing. That was a non-starter for the US. So it will be interesting to see if there's been movement on that. But I think it is, as you say, it's like, it is about sort of who can chew glass for longer. And it turns out that, surprise, surprise, the Iranians could, right? So I just wanted to go back to the point you made earlier, and this does speak to the issue of reparations, about the Iranian economy and the fact that they were feeling the pressure. I think it is worth remembering that, one, they're not answerable to their people in the way that any, normal state is. But two, these guys, Ghalibaf, Vahidi, a lot of these IRGC guys, they're veterans of the Iran-Iraq War. And that was a time, they can remember a time when Iran exported, at some points, no oil at all. And rationing and workarounds are therefore familiar to them. And they had already started moving away from using UAE ports, obviously, to Pakistani ports in Karachi and Gwadar. They're not going to turn away from that. They've been moving goods by land through Pakistan and using that Belt and Road infrastructure. They're importing things and like military parts for drones from Russia through the Caspian. And by the way, Iran had something like 100 million barrels of oil at sea, like just awaiting delivery, mainly to China on like shadow fleet tankers, which is, a good few months worth of revenue right there, I believe. But of course, one of the big worries Iran had was China and delivering oil to its central customer, which buys something like 90% of Iran's oil. But, you know, I think my point is just that their position wasn't perhaps as bad as it seemed in terms of being able to outlast and keep up the attrition. But at the same time, it's an injection of cash, a cash injection is very much a priority and something they want to walk away from this deal with. And from what we're seeing, you know, I saw on Al Arabiya just before I came on, it looks like, you know, that might be front and center in this MOU potentially.
Yeah, that's a fair point. And someone in the comments actually of the stream has said that what about ISOID as well? And I actually forgot about it. I don't think it really means anything. I think it's just Trump trolling, or trying to, you know, misdirect, as he did with Operation what was it, Midnight Hammer, which is he posted an image of Iran with the US flag on top of it, and it was the United States of Iran, right? I mean, okay, look, you know, is it sort of he's trying to say he's going to take over the Iranian state and it's going to become America? Yeah, I don't think so. I think it's just him being a prat.
Yeah, or trying to evoke the Venezuela. Or trying to suggest that it's been a similar outcome has happened in Venezuela, where effectively we are the puppeteer now. You know, we've changed the players, we have a new game, and we're the puppet masters. And everyone knows that's not what happened, and we can't be gaslit into believing that that's the outcome. But this is a really important point made by your commenter, because it is hard to measure success, right? It's hard to measure success if the casus belli, you know, the reason you went to war was unclear and confused. So there's no clear yardstick to mention it by. You know, Trump did not present a case to the UN, a case to the Congress, an official case for war to the American people. So it's difficult to discern. But basically, you know, it was a preventive war, which we talked about last time. And we heard like a whole bunch of, you know, a laundry list of reasons in his opening speech on the 28th of February. Iran still had nuclear ambitions. Iran was preparing to strike US bases. Iran was going to attack the Gulf. Iran was going to deploy intercontinental ballistic missiles to the US. And then, as your commenter says, there were very, very, very clear front and center talk about regime change. And then as the counter move came in the Strait, this morphed into open the fucking Strait. So it was a bit like being in a washing machine. And the question becomes, what was the aim? You know, what was the purpose? And can you meaningfully be said to have achieved it? And that's, you know, they've sort of flooded the zone of reasons for war. So it's going to be difficult for them as well. I mean, he's just hoping he can use images of him planting a flag and kind of these Colbert type memes of throwing Iran in the dumpster. And everyone will just be confused into thinking, yeah, he won. But I don't think it's going to play out that way, because the costs have been so significant. I think even, you know, well, certainly the next Congress will interrogate it. And I don't think that kind of headline meme type declaration of victory is necessarily going to wash beyond his base.
Yeah, I mean, you know, just on the nuclear front, I think it's worth just unpacking that a little bit. I've got to stop saying unpacking. I think it's worth dissecting a little bit further. No, I sound like a proper podcaster when I say that, and I want to diversify my language more, which is simply, you could tell I've been listening to a few today. Like this, you know, the US has it's been pushing for this 20-year suspension of uranium enrichment and the transfer of Iran's uranium, right? Which the Iranians have made very clear they're not willing to do that. And in my mind, like, even if this MOU holds and progress is made over the Strait of Hormuz, I don't see the Iranian enrichment and that aspect really changing, because that's what the Iranians see as their leverage, right? That's what they see as the single biggest deterrence in some ways. So I don't know. Do you see it differently, or what's your take on that element a bit? So I think it's
No, it's a good one. I think long term, you know, uranium is so important to them. And apparently Khamenei, you know, who we haven't heard much from at all, he gave a directive allegedly a couple of days ago where he said the uranium will not be removed from Irani soil, because there was talk that Trump said at one point, we're going to take the uranium. We don't need it, but it's going to come to us and we're going to destroy it. But it's a very, very emotive issue. It's a long-standing issue, and it was long seen as the ultimate deterrent against Israel, which is an unspoken nuclear power, right? But longer term, I think it's so baked into their sense of like national direction that I don't know that they would give up on it entirely. But it's just that in the meantime, they have this embarrassment of riches of other deterrent tools, which they didn't even know would be so successful, which is the drones and which is the Strait. So if in the short to medium term, they're like, they tactically say, you know what, have at it, take the uranium. This, that's what I was trying to suggest before. Yeah, I'm sure that they would, not necessarily play with a straight bat anyway. But I can envisage, or it's conceivable that they would say, let's put that on the back burner for now, because you know what, we have proven to be kings without it, and we can sufficiently deter both a superpower and an aspiring regional hegemon like Israel without it.
Yeah, no, that's fair. All of this, I mean, I'm just kind of curious what you think the Russians and the Chinese must be thinking of this as well. Obviously, it's quite a precarious situation for Putin. We had a great conversation just before on the state of Putin's mindset. But like, what I find interesting is the Russians and the Chinese have always been adamant that the Iranians cannot have a nuclear weapon, right? She said this to Trump when he was in Beijing, and I think they even mentioned it with Putin when he was there, even though the Russians are incredibly reliant on the Iranians and vice versa. So I don't know. Do you have any thoughts what third parties like the big powers will be thinking about this?
Yeah, I think that, as you say, Iran moving from its death grip on the nuclear ambition, I think will flatter and sort of mollify its sponsors. So that's another reason in its favor. It's another reason to pivot for now towards the drones and the Strait as the main deterrent. But I think it is important to reflect in Putin's position on all of this. He has obviously, in some ways, had a shot in the arm from this war, and he's been benefiting from the sanctions waivers from the beginning and the higher oil price. But also what we discussed last time, I think both Russia and China, the fact that the Patriot interceptors, that the Ukrainians, they need them to thwart the ballistic missiles, not the drones, but the ballistic missiles. They've been diverted from Ukraine to the Iran theater, but then they've been expended at this alarming rate, right? And so it's that idea from Napoleon when he said, never interrupt your enemy while he's making a mistake. And I think that that's what, Russia and China have been thinking through all of this. But as you know, and as you've covered in this podcast, Russia's economy is under considerable strain. And when he visited Beijing, the impression was of a more subservient power, wasn't it? I think during the fourth, China's very much in the driver's seat, it seems. Like it's not a partnership of equals in the sense that Russia's oil exports to China grew by 35% just in this the first part of this year, but also China has bought like just 500 billion or something, maybe 400 billion worth of Russian crude since the invasion of Ukraine. So they've sort of gone from peers to a more paternalistic relationship, I believe. But I think they're both, I think in the end, they're both rubbing their hands at this unending geopolitical psychodrama in the Strait of Hormuz. Like I think they have both, they just can't believe that Trump would undermine both the projection of U.S. power, but also the myth of U.S. power in this way. And I think that is what's happened.
Well, how much do you think that we could actually go back to war? My concern with all of this is that actually this peace deal doesn't go anywhere. The MOU has no teeth, and therefore it amounts to nothing because there's no substance to it, because it's just hey, we agree that we will eventually look at negotiating other stuff, which is kind of what led to this war in the first place, because Trump got fed up with the lack of progress over nuclear talks. And so we just go round and round again.
Yeah, but I think the imperatives that have sought, that have pushed Trump to sue for peace aren't going to go away. And I think for him to stop, for everyone to take a breath and then to restart is a very bad look. And part of that is because, the ceasefire has been used already by the Iranians to replenish their weapon stockpiles. Okay, so they're rebuilding much faster than U.S. intelligence estimates initially said. The U.S. intelligence community has leaked this. Ghalibaf even said today, by the way, to the Pakistanis, we've rebuilt during the ceasefire and we're not going to compromise on our red lines. So, the notion that this runway will just be breathing space for the Iranians, I think is probably tactically quite foolish. And I think it's politically a bad idea. And this is, we know that Iran still fields, up to 70% of its pre-war missile stockpiles anyway. But crucially, not only did it damage infrastructure in the Gulf, as we saw, and it hit US bases, it damaged US bases and all that, but Iran has forced the US and its partners, including Israel, to burn through their munitions, right? So I'm not sure that everyone is necessarily pushing for a resumption of the war. And yeah, I think this first phase of the military operation is hard to call a success. So the notion that you would throw good money after bad, I mean, I think it's definitely still possible. It's definitely still possible. But it's worth remembering that Iran would just rebuild in the interim. But, there are going to be so many chinks and so many spaces in which military action can restart, because as we said at the top of this is going to be a phased, multi-layered deal when it comes, because I think what we're going to see, if we see anything, is just an MOU. So of course there'll be plenty of scope for things to go wrong, for people to change their minds, for positions to change, for political weather to become turbulent, and for the calculation to change. And I don't believe that the Iranis are going to act in good faith. They never do.
No, but can we believe that the Americans are going to act in good faith? Because there was all this speculation that Trump was just going to go back to war again in the next couple of hours. The Iranians closed their airspace, was it yesterday? And there's been discussions about heightened military activity, the US putting more assets and troops on alert, and sort of heightened intentions again. So yeah. I fear that we're still we could still be, war could still be very possible. Of course we want peace, we want this war to stop and the chaos to be done. But I still fear that, right? I still fear that we could go backwards. Or you think it's largely done?
No. I think we could go backwards. And I think the Iranians are traumatized. You talked about the US maybe not acting in good faith. It's unprecedented, the way in which negotiations have been used as a cover to prepare for war, both in the June war last year and in the round of fighting now, when they were in the middle of talks in Oman. So the Iranis are very skeptical. They don't trust much of the peace process in and of itself. And I think that they are reeling from trauma, even bombing the Hamas negotiators in Doha as well. I mean, between the US and Israel, they've upended very robust diplomatic norms about protecting ceasefires and peace negotiators. So the Iranis will be skeptical as well. And I think the trust is very limited on both sides. But I think what has been a game changer in these talks, by the way, is just the role of Pakistan, because it is another militarized regime. The regime, the head of the military, the chief of staff, has been talking to the Iranians and delivering the messages, and he's also a military man. And I think that we have this newly highly military regime now in Tehran, and so they have a shared language with the Pakistanis. And I think what you lose on the technical side, maybe from the Pakistanis as negotiators, is gained in trust. So Pakistan will continue to have a central role in this, and a lot of that will be as a guarantor, I guess.
Do you not think you're putting a little bit too much faith or belief in the capacity of the Pakistanis? Don't get me wrong, I want them to be succeeding and trying very hard, but considering that they were in quite severe conflict with India and are continually, in intense issue. Well, they were at war with the Taliban the day that the Trump administration decided to launch this war. So
yeah, but Pakistan does. No, I don't mean to talk up I just mean to suggest that we know that they're not seasoned and technical negotiators, but I think that they've been able to deliver the Iranis, and that, we can't underestimate that. I think that's quite an achievement. But, the Pakistanis do have a dog in this fight, right? Their economy is heavily dependent on remittances from the Gulf. They import most of their upwards of 90% of their liquefied natural gas from the UAE. And they were one of the first states to have to move to a 4-day work week, to shut down schools, to conserve energy. And now, they're on the front line of Tehran's pivot in terms of finding new transit corridors and things like that. also, as you were talking about last time, you know, they're an integral part of this new emerging Sunni axis, which is going to be left behind this war, by this war, the Saudis, the Pakistanis, the Egyptians, and Turkey, that are going to kind of offset that UAE-Israel kind of axis, if the UAE goes in that direction. So they've really got into the new regional order on the ground floor. And, you know, it's a sort of early investor, Pakistan is, and that puts it in a good position going forward. But yeah, you know, this is a hard enough nut to crack for anyone. And as you say, Pakistan has multivalent crises. But I just want to highlight the fact that it's its army chief of staff that is leading the conversation with the Iranians. And I think this is because it's military men talking to each other. And I think that that has helped.
Well, that last point is very true, actually. What about, therefore, the another element that's not being included, or that's been very much left out, is Lebanon. Trump made no mention of Lebanon. I mean, he made a very, you know, separate sentence, as I read out earlier, about good conversation with Bibi Netanyahu. No mention of Lebanon. What, is that war just going to continue and the Iranians have just given up on that? Because that was a core demand of theirs, that the war over Lebanon and Hezbollah stops as well, right? So what do you think is going on there?
Yeah, it's a core demand. It's a very important condition for the Iranians. But, you know, anyone that expected, the Israelis expect the Lebanese state to disarm Hezbollah, but that totally misrepresents, it's entirely unfair. It misrepresents the Lebanese system, but also Lebanon's recent history. You know, the Lebanese armed forces are a hugely popular institution that was recently led by General Aoun, who's now the president, right? It's amazing. He, you know, beat them into a cohesive national military institution. This is after years of civil war between militia. But we have to be realistic. Confronting Hezbollah militarily is risking civil war in Lebanon. And Walid Jumblat, the head of the Druze, said just the other day, you know, it's feeling like the 1970s in Beirut in terms of the sectarian escalation. But crucially, it's really hard for the Lebanese state to think about disarming Hezbollah while Israel is violating the ceasefire every single day, killing scores of kids, double tap strikes on journalists, triple tap strikes on paramedics. You know, I think that massively shrinks the room for maneuver for the Lebanese state. So, you know, what conditions are these under which Hezbollah should disarm? Meanwhile, Hezbollah, you know, as Israel has moved into the south of Lebanon, essentially occupying it, Hezbollah's moved further back, but it's able to hit the Israelis with drones. Like its drone capability, its FPV drone capability has been supercharged even in the last few months. So Hezbollah's hand is not weakening the way that an Israeli kind of ground operation hoped that it might. But Israel, you know, Israel's plans for Lebanon are bleak. Lebanon does sit on the verge of another civil war. The Iranians feel that Lebanon is a very important condition they can't abandon. So I absolutely agree. And for your viewers, one of the main points to watch is actually Lebanon, because it was so important for the Iranians, but also because if it is left, if it is forsaken, and not just the humanitarian crisis and the violence that's being done to civilians, but, you know, the country could be tipped into civil war, which would destabilize, you know, Syria and the surrounding region, and just be yet another second order effect of all of this that would be a disaster.
Well, I mean, you know, I've had we have a lot of varied voices on the show, from people who are more hawkish on Iran to those who are more sympathetic, and vice versa with Israel or something like that. And a couple of commentators that we've had on who are more anti-Israeli but more sympathetic to Iran are, you know, talk about the lack of implications that, you know, despite the efforts by the Israelis with the Pyotr attack and the beheading, if you like, of Hezbollah over 24 and sort of early 25, it has remained, okay, it's been a lot weaker, but the system has still existed. And therefore, sort of any belief that you can somehow just destroy Hezbollah as part of a broader conflict with Iran, I mean, the Israelis are very stretched, and clearly they're struggling to keep control of southern Lebanon physically. I haven't followed that as much, but I'm just curious if you would say that's a accurate assessment, or what who has the upper hand or the momentum in that theatre, do you think?
I mean, it really doesn't matter. I mean, you talk about the pager attacks, and instantly, my reaction, that the sound bites that I was giving is that basically Hezbollah and its antecedent groups were forged in the cauldron of Israeli invasion of Lebanon, and the way to counter that is not to re-invade Lebanon. It's just breathing life into the movement, and this near constant killing of civilians, of course, is radicalizing more people than they'd ever kill. Not that all Hezbollah members are radicals. I've been to Bir al-Abed. I've been to Dahia. These are populated civilian suburbs. You hit a commander, I don't know how many civilians you're collapsing under the rubble as well. So it's a case study in counterproductive, in my view, Israeli tactics. And the fact is that it's a social movement with all kinds of welfare and educational arms and this and that, and it's not going to be uprooted through a campaign of violence, which is of the very same nature that gave birth to it in the first place, which is Israeli aggression. So I think the whole thing is misguided, and as I say, it reproduces some of the dynamics of the Lebanese civil war, which tore that country asunder and destabilized the wider region, for 15 years. So the Israelis, they just keep circling the drain on Lebanon. And now they want to take a hostage of the Lebanese president through the Americans, this poor guy, the position that he's in, and basically say, you do the undoable or else. And the guy can't, no one can do that. It's a priori impossible to disarm Hezbollah as a new kind of national army while the Israelis are killing civilians and burying children under rubble every single day while there's a ceasefire. So yeah, I don't think Lebanon has been straightforward for Israel. I don't think it will be this time either.
So what do you think this all means then? Are we going to see this actual deal established? I do feel this time feels different to me. I do think we're going to see some kind of written document, and it's we finally see a drawdown. But at the same time, is this all just a smokescreen, and we wake up tomorrow, or because Trump said, I think his deadline was 24th of May, right? So tonight, or whatever, when he wakes up tomorrow, and he's like, oh, screw it, can't be bothered. Let's just bomb them again. Let's bomb them into submission, right? Could we quite easily see that? I am very fearful of that.
It's possible, but I mean, there are a couple of things militating against it. One is just the information operation and the fact that he himself is holding himself to this standard by saying, I've spoken to all these people and this is what's coming. So if it then collapses, it suggests a collapse in his own credibility, one. Two, I think the fact that it's Eid next week, I don't think he's going to, I don't know, you never know. But I think that would mean that he couldn't start resuming the bombing immediately, which is what he's been saying that he would do. So he's not going to just wait a week and then, so I just think, it's unlikely that we'd see it immediately. I think it's more likely that all of these noises and all of this smoke, when they choose the next pope and the white smoke comes out, you can't put the white smoke back in the chimney and you can't put the tube back in the toothpaste. So maybe that's where we're at. But as you say, like there have been so many curveballs, and there's huge potential for wild cards, especially with this administration.
Yeah, look, I mean, I think from my end, it's as I say, I think this time feels different, even for Trump and all his walkbacks or clarifications or moronic statements that then prove non-existent. To literally, he's literally singled out by name Saudi Arabia, UAE, Qatar, Pakistan, Turkey. He's literally, they're full. It's really weird, actually. Did he really take the time to write this tweet? Because he's had to write out every single name, capitalize it. He's even spelled Turkey as Turkey. I mean, I'm not the best at remembering the names or terms of Middle Eastern officials or places. So goodness me. I think it's I don't think he wrote this, because also I don't think he has the capacity or patience to write out the word memorandum of understanding.
Did you not see that expose about the lady that writes his tweets? So
No,
oh, I mean, I don't want far be it from me to peddle in gossip, and I literally hate gossip, particularly about people I don't know and haven't met. But there was a lot of stuff in the newspapers about this lady, this young lady who's a real acolyte and follows him, and she's up with him at night and writes his tweets for him. So I think we can assume that that it's this lady that's been writing the tweets.
so he is on day release then.
Pardon? Oh yeah.
He's on day release. Yeah, okay. Sorry, we're a serious program, everybody. No, I just want to, we're probably going to wrap soon, but I just thought, the final part of this conversation, Alia, it's always really, well, only second time. It's really nice to have you on, and hopefully we can make it a regular feature. But just this is the tweet that came out as we started our conversation. I titled this exchange, this stream about getting closer, and then about 30 minutes ago, I guess 25 minutes ago, Trump posted this tweet, basically stating that we are near the point of finalization over the over this MOU, this memorandum of understanding, and yeah, he's literally written out every single name, every single title, every single nation state in full.
Yeah,
it's like his official declaration of the precursor, like the official precursor of declaring the deal itself, and then he obviously has a separate conversation or separate sentence for Israel. So I think that it's pretty official in my mind, but we are still worried about this going backwards, because you never know with this guy. He can change his mind at any point, right?
It's true. True. But you're right to point to like the formalistic elements, listing them all by name. And then I think he capitalized peace as well. So, memorandum of understanding for peace or something. So he's sort of he's painting himself into a corner a little bit. If he were to then be like, nah, forget it. I think, I think that we can put some store in that. I think that, that does send reassuring signals. But of course, it's the very beginning of a very long process, and that, plenty could go awry. In the meanwhile, I think we should never forget the lives of millions of people are hanging in the balance and are held hostage by all of this. And it's been played as a game. It's been presented as a game, not least by the Department of War. But it's not a game. And
no,
I think
it's good to mention that humanistic side as well. I mean, just to your point, as we sort of move on from this, I guess, maybe our next chat can be sort of about what exactly was achieved, because I think that's going to be one of the core elements around this. I'm already seeing on X, just reading now my feed, like I'm already seeing hardliner Republicans in Congress. I've already seen a couple of them saying, what exactly has the US accomplished during this whole situation? Iran, I think this was an article in the New York Times a while back. Iran still has about 30 of its 33 missile sites along the Strait of Hormuz. So they took out less than 11%.
That's right. The balance will not be favorable. I mean, it's extraordinary. And they've, 70% is a figure for everything almost. The sites on the coast, the missiles, the drone productions, the launchers. The balance sheet is not going to be pretty. And I think that the administration will try and obfuscate and obscure it and probably make sure that there's never a full reckoning. But you're right that it will be people within his own party. It will be people within his own party who have constituencies to answer to. I see that one of your commenters, I've just discovered the comments now, but he said something about the elections. And I'm very, very new to all of this. Something about the elections. And this is, this is going to bleed into domestic politics. I think continue to in ways that hitherto haven't been imagined. And he believes you can just draw a line under it. I don't think it's going to pan out that way.
Oh, it's a shit show. Oh, no, it's going to be a dumpster fire. There was a piece in The Economist earlier about how the Democrats can really seize not just the House of Representatives, but the Senate. But of course, one of the key comments underneath that was simply, well, the Democrats never cease to miss an opportunity to miss the opportunity to take back, I don't know. It's the Democrats to lose, I think, not Trump's to win at this rate. And to your point, but also I just want to make one last point. statistic, which is 70%. At the end of the day, this war was based on the premise initially of regime change, which was obviously complete nonsense or inachievable. So they quickly try to walk that back or clarify, no, it's about destruction of their navy, about destruction of their arsenal and military capabilities. Well, 70% of their mobile launchers are still intact, and they have about 70% of their stockpile.
Yep, absolutely.
So absolutely nothing achieved, largely. But anyway.
Yeah, but just finally, what's so important is that when they were asked about the political objectives of this campaign, do you remember the first week or two when we were just like being gaslit? They kept touting, Hegseth and these people kept touting the military objectives. We've hit all these targets, we've destroyed the Navy, we've destroyed the Air Force. And it's like, even on the military level, before the strategic, on the military level, it hasn't been successful. You know, I think that's hugely problematic because, you know, we always assumed the superpower would dominate militarily. And, you know, and we thought, yeah, as with Iraq and Afghanistan, you can still lose strategically. You know, you can win the battles and lose the war. If they've, you know, essentially lost that military battle to degrade the Iranian regime on the military level alone, I think that will percolate, that will ripple, you know, throughout the whole geopolitical environment.
Absolutely. No, I'm just looking through some of these comments here on Twitter. Lindsay is pissed. Dr. Ely David, who's one of the biggest propagandists, is absolutely pissed. People saying it's already worse than the JCPOA. It's a watered down version of the JCPOA, which was hated by Trump, and the whole reason that this whole situation arguably started again because Trump left it in 2018. So, which not only are we back to square one, we're in an even worse position than we were. Just absolutely, the like, you know,
masterclass in like self-defeating policy.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Well, but Alia, it's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you so much for your, you know, jumping on. We arranged this not too long ago, and it's late on Saturday for both of us. But you know, you're so generous with your time, and everyone watching, do check out Alia's work. She's very active on LinkedIn. Are you on X or other places that you can?
I have like stats. I don't really use Twitter. You know, I might start using it again. I don't really use Twitter or Instagram. It's just someone was impersonating me, so I had to join. But I tend to use LinkedIn because at least it's real people there. But you know what? I'll start looking at the others again, maybe.
No, I mean, anyway, if you've got a Substack, if you're active anywhere, then just to be active for people to find your work.
Well,
but otherwise,
podcast, by the way, called Turn Middle East. We're just setting it up now, but it's going to look at the human experience of the war. We mentioned that, so I thought I'd mention the pod.
Oh, great. Well, then, yeah, no, absolutely, definitely, let's do it. Some people disagree with your opinion on LinkedIn, but there you go. Or LinkedIn, I don't know. You get real people on LinkedIn. That's one of the comments. But no, everyone, thank you so much for watching. Do give the stream a like and subscribe if you're new. We've got many more coming up in the next few days, and of course, Alia will be back. But take care, everyone. Have a good evening, and let's hope for peace. Let's hope this succeeds and pulls through. We'll see.
Inshallah.